Hello and welcome to the Birch Tree Cake Tutorial by Cakes. The first thing I'm doing is getting my sugar paste. I'm using the sugar paste and I'm just rolling it out and getting rid of any air bubbles using an acupuncture needle. This is going to be the same diameter as the top of my cake. I'm then brushing the top of my cake with some water, making sure I've got a good coverage, and placing the sugar paste on top and smoothing it down. I'm then removing any excess from around the edge using a sharp knife and smoothing around those edges and making sure the sugar paste reaches the edge with my fingers. I'm then using my Dresden tool to start off a little circle shape in the middle. Once you've got that, you can continue going around the edge in lots of little circular motions. This is to create that wooden effect on the top of your cake. I start with most of the circles getting larger and larger as I go around, and then I fill in any gaps at the end. If you do see any air bubbles, then just pop them as you go. And the circles don't have to be perfect. It is a wood tree, and they wouldn't be absolutely perfect on a tree either. So I'm then adding in those extra grooves at the edge, as you can see there, just randomly. And then I'm taking another piece of sugar paste. Now this doesn't have to reach around the whole width of your cake, because you can make the joins look like natural joins on the tree trunk. So I'm just cutting a straight edge down at the bottom so it lays flat against the bottom of the cake. Then if I bring that across, I'm going to put more water on there. And this is to make sure that the sugar paste sticks. So I'm covering the whole sides of all of the cake in water. Now I'm going to cover around the outside with water, so all around the cake, and that will stick the sugar paste to it. So I'm lining up the bottom edge, the flat edge, with the sides of the cake, and just wrapping that round, smoothing it down as I go. And the main part you want to make sure definitely attaches is around the top where we've smoothed off the edge. So making sure that's nice and flat, there's no air bubbles, and then using a sharp knife, cutting off any excess from the bottom, and then running it around the top. There will be a little ridge. We want to keep that because it looks like the bark is naturally meeting the top of the slice of the log. And then the way that you bring that together is where you have those long grooves on top of your cake, you're then going to bring those down and across and make new kind of cracks in the log, just using the edge of the Dresden tool, and you can make those quite deep. So I've rolled the sugar paste around the side a little bit thicker than normal to allow me to do things like this and get the effects that we need and the textures that we need. So where I'm joining these pieces together, and you can do this in as many pieces as you'd like really, I've done 2 big ones on this cake, and this cake was a 10-inch cake. So you put it on as you did before, and then where the joins are, you just use a sharp knife to cut down that join, as I'm doing here. I missed a little bit at the top, so I'm just going to notice that and readjust it now. There we go. So you want to get it as close as you can, smooth them in together. I got it a little bit wet. You don't have to put corn flour on, but it was sticking to my hand rather than smoothing. So I just put a bit of corn flour on to make that a bit easier. Go along the top again, bring those lines in, smooth it around. And then where you have the cracks coming down, that's what this join is going to be. And it does look very natural once we've finished all of the dusting and painting and colours. I don't know if you can see there, my hair keeps getting in the way, sorry about that. But there's a little dent in that cake as well, and we can fix that. So you don't need to worry about being ultra precise. Now, the couple that I was making this cake for wanted their initials engraved onto the front. So I wanted to make this look like it actually gone into the cake. So I'm not making this ultra neat. I'm doing it as if I was actually carving it into the cake. So I wanted it to look a little bit disjointed. And then birch trees have these little brown grooves, so I'm just putting those in with a Dresden tool. It is better if you can go a little bit deeper with these, just because the colour holds onto them a little bit more when we get onto the painting stage. Some of them I did a little bit too light, so I would go back and do those a little bit heavier. Now this is where I had the dent, so we're going to put in some little nodules into the tree now, because you naturally get those. So I'm just starting with a larger ball tool, just putting some little circles here and there, just randomly, wherever I think it looks like it needs some. And then a couple of smaller ones as well, because there's all different sizes. And then with the smaller end, I'm then kind of going in underneath the lip of those to kind of create, I don't know if you can see it kind of raising up there, and it creates a more of a 3D edge to those little nodules. And we're going to fill them in a moment. So just creating a little bit more of a lip to those. And all of this creates a more natural look. And that's what we're going for essentially. So now using a sharp scalpel, I'm literally just cutting into that sugar paste, not going all the way through, just like lifting off a tiny little piece, and then either using the edge of the scalpel or my fingers just to kind of create those little cuts into the log that you'd get. It's almost like a flaky paper, I used to think it looked like when I was younger. So just a scalpel, just ever so slightly going in there. Okay, so this is finishing off the texture on the nodules. So I've just put in a little bit of water, putting in the sugar paste, and then just keep poking it basically with the Dresden tool until you're happy with the texture that you get there. And once this is dusted, it looks like almost like a branch has been snapped off in that point. So now we're getting onto the painting, and this is where it really starts to come to life. I'm using a dark brown rainbow dust, and I'm just going to be doing the top of the cake to start off with. And then you'll see I'll bring this further down into the cracks to match on the side of the cake. But we're just focusing on the top at the moment. So all of those grooves that I've created, I'm just putting in the dark brown. Then I have just plain brown, so just brown, that's a paint, edible paint that I'm putting on. And then this is a daffodil yellow, that is also an edible paint that I'm putting on top. Then basically I've got a big soft brush, I've dipped it in quite a bit of water, and then I'm just going over the top. You really want to make sure that you're getting into all of the grooves that you created earlier. And you start with a lot of water, but then you start lifting it off. So this is a lot of trial and error, and you just have to kind of do it by eye. So you're making sure everything's getting in the grooves to start off with. That's the first and most important thing, getting into all of those tiny little cracks on top, especially if this is your top tier. This wasn't for me. I had another cake going on top, but I still like to make sure I'm kind of getting it all, mainly to show you guys. Then I felt like it needed a little bit more of a yellow tint, so I went and put some more yellow on. I'm also filling in those grooves a little bit more, and then I'll go back with the water on my brush again. And it just kind of helps to blend it all. So the water is being used to blend, to get everything into the grooves that you need it to get into. Then once you see that, you start wiping off your brush, drying off your brush a bit, and then going back over the top again and lifting some of that paint off. And that's the technique I'm using. I'm putting colour in where I feel like it needs it. I'm lifting colour off where I think it's got a little bit too dark. And it is a case of just looking at it and getting it as natural as you think you can. So a little bit more water helps to lift where you think it's gone too dark. And you just keep repeating this process until you've got the colour that you're happy with. This will eventually blend into the sides of the cake as well. Okay, so now using that dark brown, I'm going right around the rim of the cake to create a bit more of a, it's almost like a burnt look, but it's the edge. So I go around the whole edge, and then I will use that to blend into the top of the cake when I'm doing the sides as well. So just the same process as we did on the top of the cake. I'm using the dark brown dust, and I've mixed it with water to create a paste, and I'm going around, and every mark that we've made on this cake now, I'm filling in with that dark brown. So the little grooves, the deep grooves that we've done kind of leading from the top, all of those nodules, I'm filling in with that dark brown. And then it's the same process except going side by side. So I've got quite a lot of water on my brush, because by the time you've gone around the edge of the cake, the dust has started to dry, and you really want to lift it off and get it going around the cake, because it needs to get into all of those little nooks and crannies. So the first thing that I'm doing is getting water on it, getting that colour all around my cake. And I'm going to and fro, because all of those little brush strokes create a really good texture. So the first lot of water that I'm putting on, I'm using to lift that brown out of those things and around the whole cake. I'll then dip my brush in more water, go around again, and as you can see here, I'm starting to lift that colour off on the second go round, but making sure it's still in the grooves and the places that I need it to be. So we're kind of getting the brown onto the cake and then lifting it off. So I'm going to slow the video down a little bit here so you can see what I'm actually meaning by that. So I'm just using some extra water, and I'm cleaning my brush off every time as well. So I'm dipping it in water, getting off some of the colour, wiping my brush, going in for a bit more water and lifting the colour off where it's too dark. So it is a process. It does take a long time, but it leaves a really great effect at the end. Now I'm going in with a dry dust. So this is the same dust and the same colour that I've used on the darker parts of our cake. But this is it as a dry dust. I'm going over the top of the nodules and then creating texture around the edge of the nodules and all of those little flaky pieces just on the edges of them. And it just creates another dimension. It's another texture, and it just brings it to life. This is the part where the cake really starts to actually look like a tree trunk. So just all of the edges of those little pieces, just a little dusting, and then making sure that the inside of those flaky pieces, I don't know what the technical term for those are, but the inside of all of those are quite dark as well. And then to really bring it to life, it's almost like a mossy thing. So it's actually moss green is the rainbow dust that I'm using here. And I'm doing some darker parts around where I've got the nodules and the dark brown, and then some lighter parts just where I think it needed a little bit more colour. And the green really does just make everything pop and make it look a lot more natural, because you do get this green colour on birch trees when you have a look at them. So just anywhere I think it needs it really, where something's a little bit too white, maybe I've lifted off a bit too much colour, or around the dark pieces where I feel like it needs to be blended a little bit more. And the green, it just merges nicely, and you'll see in the final pictures it really does make a difference. So this particular cake is for a couple called Mr. and Mrs. Sparrow. So I also made some sparrows to sit on top and hand painted those in cocoa butter. And they wanted toadstools instead of flowers. So we've got a mix of toadstools that I've also handmade. And then I've put on some edible green moss, which is basically coloured sponge cake that's been ripped apart and placed on and attached with royal icing. So this is the finished cake. I hope you like the tutorial. Basically you can do that with as many tiers as you like, and yeah, I think the effect really works. So I hope you enjoy it too. Please let me know what you think in the comments, and thank you for watching.